In a modest but warm home on the outskirts of Mapleton, 12-year-old Eliza Fletcher lived happily with her father, James. Her mother had passed away when she was just 4, leaving a void that her father worked tirelessly to fill with enough love for 2 parents. "Eliza, sweetheart, breakfast is ready." James called up the stairs, his voice carrying the warmth that had become Eliza's safety blanket. Eliza bounded down the stairs, her curly brown hair bobbing with each step. "Coming, Dad." Their morning ritual was simple but precious. Homemade pancakes on Sundays, her father's specialty, with discussions about books they were reading or Eliza's ambitious plans for the future. "I'm going to write books someday, Dad. Books that make people feel something," Eliza said, her eyes bright with dreams. James smiled, the pride evident in his eyes. "And I'll be first in line to buy them all." But life has a cruel way of disrupting happiness. What started as occasional coughing fits for James quickly escalated into hospital visits, worried doctors, and finally, a devastating diagnosis: aggressive lung cancer. 6 months, maybe less, the doctor had said quietly, while Eliza waited outside, unaware that her world was crumbling. James, practical even in crisis, had recently remarried. Victoria, with her perfect smile and designer clothes, had seemed like the answer, providing Eliza with maternal guidance. She had 2 children of her own, twins Derek and Diana, both 15 and politely distant toward Eliza. When James passed away just 4 months after his diagnosis, Eliza's grief was all-consuming. Through tear-blurred eyes at the funeral, she barely noticed how Victoria's hand on her shoulder felt less like comfort and more like ownership. "You'll be living with us now, of course," Victoria had said afterward, her voice honey-sweet in front of the funeral guests but lacking any real warmth. "We're family, after all." The transformation began so subtly that Eliza hardly noticed. First, it was moving her things to the smaller bedroom upstairs. Then, it was taking care of small chores around the house. But as the weeks passed after her father's death, Eliza watched in silent horror as her identity as daughter was systematically erased and replaced with something else entirely a servant in what had once been her own home. "Eliza, the breakfast dishes aren't going to wash themselves." Victoria's voice cut through Eliza's grief-induced fog one morning, 3 months after her father's funeral. Eliza looked up from her homework, confused. "But I have a math test tomorrow, and nothing," Victoria interrupted, her previously well-maintained facade cracking to reveal something cold underneath. "Your father isn't here to coddle you anymore. Everyone in this house contributes." That evening, Eliza found her school backpack emptied, her books stacked neatly on her bed. "We've decided to homeschool you," Victoria announced over dinner, not bothering to look up from her plate. "It's more practical, given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" Eliza asked, her voice small. Victoria's children exchanged knowing glances across the table. "Financial circumstances, dear," Victoria replied with a tight smile. "Your father left us in quite a situation. The least you can do is help around the house while I figure things out." Homeschooling, as it turned out, meant no schooling at all. Within weeks, Eliza's days were filled with cleaning, cooking, and laundry. Her once clean hands grew callous from scrubbing floors and washing dishes. Her bedroom had been repurposed for Victoria's home office, and Eliza was relocated to the dusty attic space with its slanted ceiling and single window. "You can't do this," Eliza had protested once, when Victoria took away her phone, her last connection to her old friends. "My dad wouldn't want this." Victoria's smile had turned icy then. "Your father isn't here, is he? And do you know why? Because he was foolish with money, naive about business, and left me to clean up his messes, including you. Be grateful I didn't send you to foster care." The twins, Derek and Diana, watched Eliza's transformation with detached amusement. Occasionally, they created messes specifically for her to clean. "Oops," Diana would say, knocking over a glass of juice while looking directly at Eliza. "Better clean that up before it stains." At night, curled up on her thin mattress in the attic, Eliza would hold her father's picture, the one possession Victoria had overlooked, and whisper to him about her day. "I don't understand, Dad," she'd say through tears. "Why did you leave me with her? Didn't you see what she was really like?" But as months turned into a year and then two, Eliza's tears gradually dried up. In their place grew something harder, more resilient, a quiet determination that Victoria couldn't touch. She might control Eliza's circumstances, but she couldn't control her mind or her spirit. On her 15th birthday, uncelebrated and unacknowledged by her stepfamily, Eliza made herself a promise while staring at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror in the attic. "This isn't forever," she whispered to herself. "This is just a chapter, not the whole story." The attic became Eliza's sanctuary. Behind a loose floorboard, she kept small treasures: her father's watch, a dog-eared copy of Jane Eyre that had belonged to her mother, and eventually a growing collection of books smuggled to her by Thomas. Thomas Miller was a grocery delivery boy who came every Thursday with Victoria's precisely detailed order. At 16, he was gangly and kind-eyed, and he had noticed a girl who always rushed to help unload the groceries, despite the expensive-looking woman barking orders from inside. "You missed one," he said one day, holding out a paper bag after Victoria had gone inside. Eliza reached for it, confused. "I don't think we ordered anything else." "No, this is for you," Thomas said quietly, glancing toward the house. Inside the bag was a paperback copy of Great Expectations and a chocolate bar. Tears sprang to Eliza's eyes. It had been so long since anyone had given her anything. "Why?" she managed to ask. Thomas shrugged. "You look like you could use a friend. And maybe something to read that isn't a cleaning manual." Thus began their Thursday ritual. Thomas would bring books, sometimes borrowed from the library, sometimes purchased from second-hand stores. Eliza devoured them all, reading by the dim light filtering through her attic window long after the house had gone to sleep. "You're smart," Thomas told her one day as they quickly exchanged a book behind Victoria's rose bushes. "You deserve better than this." "Everyone deserves better than they get sometimes," Eliza replied with wisdom beyond her years. "But I'm going to make sure I get what I deserve eventually." Through the books, Eliza continued her own education. She learned history and literature, science and mathematics. When Victoria wasn't home, she would sneak into the study and use a computer, teaching herself through online resources and saving notes in hidden files. "You're looking thinner," Thomas noted with concern after nearly a year of their friendship. Eliza shrugged. "Victoria says food costs money, and I need to earn my keep." The next delivery included extra groceries that Thomas claimed were mistakes that would just be thrown out if returned to the store. Eliza knew better, but accepted his kindness with quiet gratitude. Life settled into a pattern: endless chores for Victoria, secret studying in the attic, and Thursday meetings with Thomas that sustained her hope. The twins left for college, their departure barely changing Eliza's daily routine, except for fewer messes to clean. On her 17th birthday, Thomas brought her something special, a sleek journal with her initials embossed on the cover. "For your stories," he said. "You're always talking about becoming a writer someday." "Victoria would find it," Eliza said sadly. "Not if you hide it with the other books," Thomas suggested. "And anyway, someday is as far away as you think. You'll be 18 in a year. You could leave." The thought had occurred to Eliza many times, but the logistics always defeated her. Leave to go where? With what money? Victoria controlled every aspect of her life, including any access to funds that might have been left by her father. "I can't just wander off with nothing," Eliza said practically. Thomas looked at her earnestly. "You wouldn't have nothing. You'd have me. My aunt owns a bookstore in the city. She needs help, and there's a small apartment above it. I've already asked her." For the first time in years, Eliza felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope. Spring cleaning was Victoria's obsession, and the attic was finally on her radar. "Everything out," she commanded Eliza. "I'm thinking of converting this space into something useful." Eliza's heart pounded as she carefully moved her hidden books and treasures while Victoria was out at her weekly salon appointment. As she lifted the loose floorboard that concealed her most precious possessions, something caught her eye, the edge of an envelope she'd never seen before. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out. It was addressed to her in her father's handwriting. "My dearest Eliza," the letter inside began. "If you're reading this, then somehow this letter found its way to you despite the circumstances. I have asked my attorney, Mr. Winters, to deliver this to you on your 18th birthday if anything should happen to me, but I fear Victoria may intervene." Eliza's breath caught in her throat as she continued reading. "I've established a trust fund for you that Victoria cannot access. It contains enough for your college education and to start your life independently. Mr. Winters holds all the documentation at his office on Fifth Avenue. My greatest regret is that I didn't see Victoria's true nature before it was too late. Please forgive me, my darling girl. Know that you were always the light of my life. Dad." Tears streamed down Eliza's face, not just for the revelation of the inheritance, but for the vindication. Her father hadn't abandoned her to this fate willingly. He'd tried to protect her. Over the next few months, Eliza planned meticulously. She couldn't access the trust fund until she turned 18, but knowing it existed gave her strength. She began saving the small amounts of money she occasionally found while cleaning loose change under couch cushions, bills forgotten in coat pockets. "I found my father's letter," she told Thomas during one of their brief meetings. "There's money waiting for me. I just need to hold on until my birthday." Thomas squeezed her hand. 3 more months. You can do it." But Victoria seemed to sense something had changed. She became more demanding, more critical, assigning impossible tasks and punishing Eliza with reduced meals when they weren't completed to her satisfaction. "You seem different lately," Victoria remarked coldly one evening as Eliza served dinner. "Almost hopeful. I don't like it." "I was just thinking about my father," Eliza replied carefully. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Your father was a fool who made poor choices, including marrying me when I had no interest in raising someone else's child. Remember your place in this house. Eliza, it's the only one you'll ever have." But Victoria was wrong, and for the first time, Eliza allowed herself to smile at the knowledge. On the morning of her 18th birthday, Eliza woke before dawn. She dressed carefully in the best clothes she had, still shabby, but clean, and packed her few belongings into a backpack. Her books, her father's watch, her mother's copy of Jane Eyre, and the small amount of money she'd saved. She waited in the kitchen, calmly making breakfast as she did every morning. When Victoria entered in her silk robe, Eliza placed a cup of coffee in front of her one last service. "I'm leaving today," Eliza announced, her voice steady. Victoria laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "And go where exactly? With what money? Don't be ridiculous." "I know about the trust fund," Eliza said quietly. "The one my father set up for me. The one you've been hiding." The coffee cup froze halfway to Victoria's lips. For a moment, genuine shock registered on her face before it hardened into something ugly. "You ungrateful little—" "No!" Eliza interrupted, surprising herself with her firmness. "I've been grateful for the roof over my head. I've been grateful for the food, sparse as it was. I've even been grateful for the work, because it taught me resilience. But I won't be grateful for theft, which is what you've done by hiding my inheritance." Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Everything I did was justified. Your father left me with debts, with responsibilities. He left you this house, fully paid for," Eliza corrected her. "He left you his life insurance policy. I've seen the mail, Victoria. I've cleaned your office. I know what you have and haven't received." For a moment, they stared at each other's stepdaughter and stepmother, servant and mistress, but the power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. "Mr. Winters is expecting me this morning," Eliza continued. "After that, you'll never have to see me again." Victoria's face twisted with rage. "You think you can just walk into a lawyer's office looking like that and be taken seriously? You're nothing, Eliza. Nothing but a maid who's forgotten her place." The words were designed to wound, to reinstall the doubt that had been Eliza's constant companion for years. But they bounced off her newfound armor. "My father loved me," Eliza said simply, "and somewhere out there's a life I'm meant to live. Thank you for the lessons in survival, Victoria. They'll serve me well." With that, she walked out the front door, not sneaking out the back as Victoria might have expected. With her head held high, Thomas was waiting at the end of the street with his aunt's car. "Ready?" he asked, his face lighting up at the sight of her determined expression. "Ready," Eliza confirmed, sliding into the passenger seat without looking back at the house that had been her prison for 6 years. Mr. Winters was indeed expecting her. The trust fund was substantial enough for college and a modest start in life. Victoria had intercepted the lawyer's attempts to contact Eliza over the years, but with Eliza now legally an adult, there was nothing Victoria could do. "Your father was very clear about his wishes," Mr. Winters explained kindly. "He wanted you to have the freedom to pursue your dreams, especially your writing." That her father had remembered her childhood ambition brought fresh tears to Eliza's eyes, tears of gratitude rather than grief. That night, in the small but clean apartment above Thomas's aunt's bookstore, Eliza stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. "How does it feel?" Thomas asked, bringing her a cup of tea. "Strange," Eliza admitted. "Freedom feels strange, but good." Music transitions to something more upbeat. For years passed in the blur of education and opportunity. Eliza enrolled in college, studying English and creative writing, while working part-time at Page's Books Thomas's aunt's store. The small apartment above the shop became home, decorated with second-hand furniture and slowly filling bookshelves. Thomas remained her steadfast friend, though their relationship evolved as they both matured. What had started as kindness became respect, and respect blossomed into something deeper. "You should submit this," Thomas said one evening, holding up the manuscript Eliza had been working on for months, a thinly veiled account of her years with Victoria. "It's not ready," Eliza protested, reaching for the pages. "It's more than ready," Thomas insisted. "And so are you." To her shock, Wandering Bird Publishing, where she had secured an internship in her junior year, expressed interest in her manuscript. Her editor, a sharp-eyed woman named Caroline, recognized the authenticity in Eliza's writing. "There's power in your story," Caroline told her. "Power and hope. People need both." When Daughter of Ash was published, Eliza held the first copy with trembling hands. Her name embossed on the cover felt like reclaiming something that had been stolen from her, her identity, her voice, her future. The book found an audience immediately, resonating with readers who saw their own struggles reflected in Eliza's journey. Letters poured in from people who had survived similar circumstances, who had found strength in her words. "You never imagined this, did you?" Thomas asked as they celebrated her book's success over dinner in a restaurant they could never have afforded years earlier. "When you were scrubbing those floors?" Eliza considered the question carefully. "I think I did imagine it, actually. Not the details, but the feeling. Freedom. Purpose. This." She reached across the table and took his hand. "You." Thomas's business degree had let him open his own small bookstore/cafe, specializing in local authors and fair trade coffee. Together, they had built lives that complemented each other, different from their beginnings, but aligned in their values. When Thomas proposed on the 5th anniversary of Eliza's escape from Victoria's house, the symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. "You helped me find freedom," Eliza said, tears glistening in her eyes. "But you never tried to rescue me. You knew I had to rescue myself." "I just held the ladder steady," Thomas replied with a smile. "You did all the climbing." The invitation to speak at Mapleton Literary Festival came as a surprise. Eliza had avoided her hometown since leaving, building her new life deliberately far from old wounds. But with her second book gaining even more acclaim than the first, the organizers had been persistent. "You don't have to go," Thomas assured her, watching her stare at the invitation. "Maybe I do," Eliza said thoughtfully. "Maybe it's time to close that chapter properly." The town hadn't changed much. The same main street, the same park where her father had once pushed her on the swings. But Eliza had changed, and returned with her success and happiness intact felt like its own form of victory. After her reading at the festival, a familiar figure approached the signing table. Victoria looked older, the carefully maintained facade of wealth now visibly cracking. Her designer clothes were a season out of date, her jewelry less ostentatious. "Eliza," she said, her voice lacking its former authority. Eliza looked up, her pen pausing over the book she was signing. For a moment, she was 15 again, afraid and powerless. But the feeling passed quickly. "Victoria," she acknowledged calmly, "would you like me to sign a book for you?" Victoria hesitated, then placed a copy of Daughter of Ash on the table. I recognized myself. You weren't very subtle with the character names. I wasn't trying to be, Eliza replied honestly. The business failed, Victoria said abruptly. Your father's old company. I tried to run it, but she trailed off, seemingly unsure why she was sharing this information. Eliza signed the book with a simple inscription. To Victoria, may you find peace. Eliza Fletcher. I'm not here for money, Victoria clarified quickly, misreading Eliza's neutral expression. I didn't think you were, Eliza said. But if you were, I wouldn't give you any. What I would give you is this. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. It's for the Mapleton Community Center. They're launching a program for displaced homemakers women who need job skills after divorce or widowhood. They need instructors for their business classes. With your experience, failed or not, you might have something to offer. Victoria stared at the card, then at Eliza, confusion evident in her expression. Why would you help me? I'm not, Eliza said simply. I'm helping them, and maybe you'll help yourself in the process. As Victoria walked away, Thomas approached, having watched the exchange from a distance. You okay? He asked gently. Eliza nodded. Better than okay. I think I just put down something heavy I've been carrying for a long time. That night, in their hotel room, Eliza made a decision that would shape the next chapter of her life. I want to start a foundation, she told Thomas. For kids like me, kids caught in bad situations with no way out. Thomas smiled, unsurprised. The Fletcher Foundation has a nice ring to it. The Fletcher Miller Foundation sounds even better, Eliza corrected him, referring to the surname they would share after their upcoming wedding. 1 year later, the foundation opened its first residence for teens escaping abusive homes. Eliza made sure each room had bookshelves and journals, believing as she always had in the power of stories, both reading them and writing your own. Camera zooms out to show Eliza sitting in a comfortable chair in her study, bookshelves lining the walls. When my father died, I thought my story was over, Eliza says, speaking directly to the camera. Instead, it was just beginning. A different story than I'd imagined, but ultimately a better one. Cut to scenes of the Fletcher Miller Foundation. Teenagers reading and writing, finding safety and purpose. We all face chapters in our lives that seem impossible to endure. Moments when it feels like the world has taken everything from us. But if my journey has taught me anything, it's that those chapters don't define our entire story unless we let them. Cut to Eliza and Thomas at their wedding, surrounded by friends including Mr. Winters, Thomas's Aunt Paige, and even Victoria, standing awkwardly at the edge of the gathering. The hardest lesson and the most liberating one was learning that forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened. It's about refusing to let it control your future. It's saying, what you did to me matters, but what I do now matters more. Final scene, Eliza at her desk, working on a new manuscript, pausing to look a photo of her father. So, if you're in the middle of a dark chapter right now, please hold on. Keep turning the pages. Keep writing, even when it seems like no one is reading. Someone will, and that someone might just be your future self, looking back with pride at how far you've come.